Welcome back to the Trendcrusher podcast. I'm Peter K, aka Trendcrusher. A little under 2 years ago, when I started doing this separate podcast, the Trendcrusher one, I didn't know exactly what I would be doing, who would I be talking to, and someone that I actually wanted to talk to for a long time but hadn't had a chance to was Nathaniel Larochette. Nathaniel is someone who's known to play the classical and acoustic guitar, and his primary project when I knew him was Musk Ox. He also had another project called The Night Watch. And 2 years ago, Nathaniel had just released the latest Musk Ox album, and we got onto a Zoom call. And yeah, it's crazy to think that it's been almost 2 years since then. And one of the things that Nathaniel talked about in that chat we had was about working on a solo album. So when I got an email with the promo copy of the album, which is Old Growth, I knew I had to get Nathaniel back on the podcast and talk to him about it, but also how different Old Growth is compared to his previous solo album, right? And yeah, I think that's enough of an introduction. Let's get straight into my chat with Nathaniel. Welcome back, Nathaniel. And I'm saying welcome back because all the way back in October 2021, when I had no idea what I'll be doing or doing something like this, I hopped onto a Zoom call with you and we talked all things Musk Ox. So glad we're doing this again.
Yeah, no, I saw the email from you and I was very excited. I thought, all right, I get to talk to Peter again. So yeah, thanks again for taking time to talk about my music. I really appreciate it.
Now, I'm going to definitely link to that episode, but towards the end of that episode, we were kind of talking about your projects and what you were currently working on. And one of the things that you mentioned was a solo album. So fast forward all these months, here we are, the album's at the cusp of release. I mean, we're literally talking like
A couple
a few
weeks.
days.
I think
Oh
that
wow, I
two
thought
or
it's
it's like 2 weeks, like the 21st. Yeah.
okay. So we still have time. But uh, how does it feel now that you're actually probably ready to release? Have you got any merch or
Yeah.
any
Yeah,
physical
yeah, I've
stuff
got some
ready?
vinyl and I've got some tab books, some guitar books. So those are the two kind of physical merch items. Yeah,
But how does it feel now to have all of this like finally done?
yeah, it's funny because I've done a lot of albums, and so you do get used to it a little bit, but there's still this very specific feeling that when you get to this point that it's like this relief that because to the artist it feels like it's been done, because I recorded it. I had the masters in 2021, and some of the music is almost is like maybe a decade old. So it's this very kind of been this long going project that I've just been slowly chipping away at. And, by the time it's finished, you feel like it's just old and like maybe you're not as excited about it. But I find as you get closer to the release, you get excited again because you share the music or you share the singles, and people are hearing it for the first time. So it becomes new again. You're kind of seeing the music in a new light. And I find that that's really nice. And it's, I don't know, for me, like just finishing work is so important. And when I get to this point where it's almost done, like it just feels like I don't know, it feels like this kind of energetic release of just okay, all these emotions and all these experiences and all this music that I can finally like put it into the world, and hopefully people can enjoy it. So it feels like kind of climbing a mountain a little bit. Like you just reach this peak, and the whole time it's just like you're just seeing rock in front of you. You're like, oh, like it's just this, it's this. It seems like it's the same rock all the time, but really it's changing. But you don't realize it until you sort of get there and turn around. And that's kind of, I guess that's my best sort of analogy for it. Just turning around and seeing the landscape and seeing how far you've come, and sort of reflecting, especially since this is my first solo album in 7 years. Uh, yeah, so it just feels like it's just a relief, and you know, it's just nice to get it done. I think there's a lot of stress before where you think like, oh, is anyone going to like it, or is anyone going to hear it even, because everybody's so busy and music is constantly changing. But once I put out the first single and I saw that people were excited, it felt really good. It felt like, okay, it feels good. And then even getting the guitar books, that's a thing I've been working on for a long, long time. And actually, recently I got like the physical book, and just looking at it and touching it and seeing the notes on the paper, I realized like, oh, this is real. Like this is something that somebody else can learn. And so yeah, I think that's the best description. It feels really old, but then it becomes new again when you're finally like sharing it to the world. So yeah, it's a big relief, I find.
Okay, I have to be honest. You've left me with so many different things to pick up from. So I'm going to try and at least pick up few of the things, right? First one, since you said it's been mastered since 2021, when was the last time, or when did you recently actually go and revisit the album or listen to it?
Yeah, the other day actually, because when I got the vinyl, I was trying to listen to it on vinyl, and I just couldn't. It just was like my brain couldn't really process it because I just obsessed over it so much. But the other day when I had it was the proofs for the guitar book, so it's like they give me one copy to sort of review and see if there's any problems. And so I decided to like listen to the album while going through the book to make sure everything worked out, and that was actually a very nice experience. Like I wasn't really kind of, I don't know, I was able to sort of appreciate it, I find. So that was a positive experience. Just kind of, again, seeing the book in front of me and seeing the notes and this kind of idea that I had for a long time now coming together. So yeah, I find there are some moments where I would like try really hard to have an experience with it, like, okay, I'm putting on the vinyl, I'm sitting in the dark and I'm going to listen to it. And it's like too much pressure. Whereas this was in the morning. I find like morning is a very good time to listen to your own music because you're just fresh. Nighttime is just a disaster every time. So this was a nice morning. I got the guitar book and I was reading the music and listening to it, and yeah, so that was, I think, maybe like last week. So yeah, it was good.
And okay, so you said a very interesting thing. So I'm going to pick on that in just a second about listening to music, especially this album, in the morning and the evening. I had an observation on that when I tried to do it. But going back to what you said earlier, and I'm a bit surprised by it, and share as much as you feel right to do so. After all these years, I mean, like, I've known you for, I don't know, 15 years, close to, I think now, since we first interacted when the first Muskox album came out, right? Do you still struggle with, do people still care about my music? How's it going to be accepted? I mean, let's be honest. I mean, I'm not trying to like blow smoke up you, but you've literally played with like some of the biggest bands and performed with some of the biggest bands in metal, right? Or at least in extreme metal when you think about it. So that's where I'm kind of surprised.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. And I think it's interesting because when I started, when I did the first Muskox demos, they were in like 2006. And so that was a very different time in terms of the internet, in terms of how much content you were absorbing and how much noise there was. And I think in those days I felt very free, and it was sort of, I was on this adventure and I had no expectations and I was just following, music. And then I did the first Muskox album and people liked it. And I don't know. I think I've always felt like a bit of an outsider. I feel like I've never really fit in anywhere. Like, it's like I'm a metalhead, but I do like acoustic music. So, but a lot of metalheads maybe won't listen to it, but then I'll play it for people who don't know metal and they don't know really the influences. I've always felt a bit on the outside, and I think that kind of self doubt. It's true that as you accomplish things, and a lot of the things I've accomplished, they it, I have accomplished a lot of things that make me feel very proud, and very, very happy with what I've done. But I think there's always this feeling, and I think maybe a lot of artists have it, of just, like, you make your album, and but then you compare it to the things that you love and you're like, I'll never be able to achieve what they achieve, so what's the point? But then I have people contacting me and saying, oh, your music really inspired me. And I think it's always a challenge of, especially now where it's like, things are just constant. Everything's about what's happening now, and I'm always thinking like, can I make an album that somebody will like in 20 years or in 30 years or 50 years, and seeing that people still like the first Muskox album after all these years, it's like it's a good feeling. But sometimes you never really know what's going to happen, and I think that even with the things you accomplish, it's maybe it's just I can't really speak for anyone but myself. I think there is a lot of insecurity, and it sort of comes in waves. Like there's moments where I feel like, okay, I feel really good and I feel proud, and then there's other moments where it's like, okay, well, I have this many streams. What about this? Or what? It's like you get distracted by all that stuff. And I was listening to an interview recently with Matthew Perry from Friends, who plays Chandler, and he was quoting Jim Carrey, because Jim Carrey said, "I hope everybody gets all of the dreams that they ever wanted, so they can realize that it'll never be the thing that makes you happy." And I think for me, I it's just about continuing. Even with this album, like what I find is interesting is there's this kind of like there's the pull of music and what needs to come out of me, and then there's kind of my brain, which is sort of like, okay, well, is this, does this fit into this genre, does this fit into that genre, what, look at this guitarist, look at that guitarist. But what I'm proud of myself is that I always honor the creativity even if I fight myself. It's like Old Growth is just the album that I needed to make, because I don't there wasn't an album like that, an album of, just short acoustic interludes written by a metalhead, and I just had to make this album, and even if I questioned it, I never gave up on it, and so I think that like my whole catalog, regardless of how, I don't know, popular or how much money or whatever, it's like I've always been very true to the things that I want to make. And I think it's just been a process of like just learning to trust that, because even if I doubt and question, it's like the force of music is like, finish this, you know it's like, even if I think, well, I should do this, I should do that, when I sit with my guitar, this is what comes out, and I have to honor that. It doesn't matter if it's the most popular thing ever. It's just that's this album is the album that I can make, that it's my offering. It's I think people can hear it and say, oh, that's Nathaniel playing guitar. Like it has that, I think it has my kind of fingerprints on it. And that's always been the most important thing to me, is doing something that's unique to myself, and that doesn't that yeah that is unique, that I haven't heard yet, or that is missing in my record collection, that. And so I find myself, as much as I sort of am, I do battle with self-doubt and those kinds of things, I'm always trying to move forward, and I'm, because some people I think would have this album and then the doubt would prevent them from ever releasing it. And so I always tell myself, like, just finish it, even if it's old, even if you don't like how you played this song on it or whatever. Like, you have to just trust it and just let it be what it is. And even if, and whatever happens after that is, you can't really control it, So it's a constant kind of battle. And again, it's like you were saying, like I've accomplished things, like I collaborated with Agalok, which, like, as a teenager, I'd never would have imagined that for a second. And so, those are things that it's like, oh yeah, I accomplished that, and I still doubt myself. And so it's kind of like the Jim Carrey thing. It's like the thing you could dream of. It's like being able to collaborate with these people. It's like you still have to sort of like work on yourself to like accept yourself, I guess. Yeah, that's my long answer.
Yeah. No, first of all, thanks so much for sharing that, because I think like a lot of people, irrespective whether they're musicians or not, will kind of relate to that. And I think people who are in the creative field, in addition to musicians, can totally relate to that, man. I mean, like, there's at least 5 times a day where I'm like, what's the point of all of this, right? And I think like a lot of times you think that voice is only playing in your head. When I have conversations like this, I'm like, really, you
Yeah.
too? That kind of thing.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, everyone, even like, and then you listen to, yeah, like I was saying, I was listening to this interview with this like multimillionaire, one of the most famous actors of all time, and you realize like, oh, like yeah, it's the real art of life is like just learning to accept ourselves and like be, just trust ourselves. And that is kind of what I learned through these albums is like just trusting the choices and that this is what I need to do. Because I feel like I have the skills to do other things that maybe would be more accessible or fit me into a certain genre more cleanly. But at the end of the day, it's just that's not where the music is kind of like guiding me. And Old Growth to me is like it's a really important album for me because it's in this kind of noisy sort of world, like it's not a clickbait kind of thing. It's not something that it's like, oh wow, look at this, like, oh, it's more like something that is personal, that I hope that people who take the time to hear it can actually have find space for themselves, within it, which I think is, there's some of my favorite albums are the ones that just give me a lot of space to sort of just be present. um, and so I hope people can find that in this. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to hold my thoughts on listening of the album for just 1 second because you brought it up, and I was kind of alluding to that when I talked about Aglock, right? I mean, uh, this album actually has links to the time back when you actually recorded with Aglock for their album. The Serpent and the Sphere, and that was all the way back in 2012. So that's where at least the track. So take me back to the time that you kind of wrote Ashes, right, which is the first single from Old Growth. How did you kind of decide that this is going to be part of Old Growth, and what was that quality, or what was that thing that still remained with you all these years later?
Yeah, I always, when you listen to the piece, I think it might even, to me, it's like maybe the most metal kind of piece on it. And like when I wrote it, the original idea was, okay, there's a lot of space because I imagine that, the band could add some different layers to it, and yeah, and then they ended up going with the other ones. And so I just kind of kept it. And I don't know, there's just something about that piece that it's almost like that was almost the beginning of this project, the original inspiration, right? Like I was saying this in another interview where I feel like every project I do, there's the seed for the next project. Like there's something that I do that's like, oh, and I feel like this is sort of a direct connection to the Serpent interludes. And yeah, it's funny because I don't have a specific memory about writing that piece. It's just kind of stayed with me. It's just always kind of been there. And when I was compiling all the material for this album, I ended up cutting out a lot of songs when I actually was in the studio. But this one always just sort of stuck with me. And actually, when I was doing the recording, we had done, it was recorded over like 3 days. And the first day was, it took just driving to the place, getting set up. We were tried in the afternoon. We got some things done, other things weren't working, and then by the end I was just really tired, so we didn't record in the evening. And then the next day we like recorded all day from the morning to the evening. And then when the evening came, I felt like I had more energy, so we set up some candles and started recording. And Ashes was one of the first pieces that we recorded that night, or it might have been the first one. And I remember just like I had been playing all day, so I felt like very comfortable with my guitar playing. And but I remember being really worried about this piece, about being able to do it right. And I remember just when I got through it, I just felt like, whoa, like I did it. Like this, it really kind of was like a special moment. And then I was able to sort of do like another three or four sort of like back to back. But this one was like one of the first ones that it's almost like there was like some day recordings and some night recordings. And like this one really kind of set the stage for that. Um, yeah, and I think it felt right to release it as a single because of the Agalok connection, um, for the people that were interested in that.
Okay, I think that's a great introduction to Ashes. So let's play it for everyone. Okay, that was Ashes of the upcoming solo album by Nathanael, Old Growth. Now, this is the time I'm actually going to finally talk about the listening, right? And I want to see if it kind of correlates or has any impact when you were talking about the recording and kind of dive in. Because I did both. I tried listening to the album in the morning and at night also. And it, to be honest, and it probably could be me also, that when I heard it in the morning, it kind of gave me that kind of energy. It just kind of like gave me that kind of thing where I was like, okay. And I normally listen to a lot of music while I'm taking a walk or stuff like that in the morning. So that's when I heard it in the morning. But when I heard it at night, it just calmed me down. It just like got me to kind of like wind down in there. And I knew like, okay, I'm gonna like within a few minutes kind of like totally pass out in there. But it's one of those things, right? And that's what I find like instrumental music, because like normally I use instrumental music while doing some kind of stuff like writing emails or things like that, because you don't want like words or vocals kind of coming in unless it's like something which is just like you're not really paying attention to what is being said. But that's when I kind of use, I mean, I've been a huge fan of like lo-fi, and I've been finding all these various lo-fi playlists over the last year or so. But then also comes stuff like what you play, which honestly I'm so glad you said it, right? Because I was like, how do you really classify this music? I mean, this appeals to non-metalheads, but like the metalheads will totally get where this is coming from, right? Because a lot of times, and you talked about it when you were referring to the Aglock album, right? These are the interludes that we've heard in various, whether it was like death metal, black metal albums, and you've just kind of like taken all of that put together and like the best, if I may say, right? But take me back to the recording process, because from what I've read, this was all done one take. And you also said that you kind of drove, so you done this at a cabin outside the city. So why kind of choose to do it that way? How did that kind of environment have an impact on the overall
Yeah,
recording process?
yeah. I think well, I had recorded with my friend at this cabin before, and I think it was just a nice. I just kind of wanted to have a change of scenery and just sort of just get away a little bit, um, and so the pieces, like the pieces you hear, were recorded in one take. But obviously, I did a lot of takes. To some of the pieces I was able to get first try, not many of them, but a few of them. But I really wanted to do that because in the past there have been times when I've done, like done a take and then do some editing, or if there's a part that repeats, maybe copy a part, which is normal in recording. But what I've found is that like when you're actually playing a piece all the way through, you can feel the energy kind of changes, or you feel like you're really witnessing a moment, just a moment in time, right? With no, just nothing fancy really. And that was something I really wanted to do, and I was pretty nervous about if I could do it or not. And like when I showed up, I had 18 pieces I wanted to do, and I tried to do some of them, and we spent like 2 or 3 hours on some pieces, and they weren't working, and I had to accept that, like, okay, these aren't working. And then some pieces I didn't think I was going to record that I hadn't even practiced came back, and then I ended up writing some new pieces. So it was a very kind of fluid process, which is how it is when you're recording. Like it's very intuitive. Like if something doesn't feel right, you have to trust that it doesn't feel right. You can't really like force it. And so that was kind of the experience. So originally I had booked 2 days, but after 2 days I realized I needed that third one. And even for the third one, I recorded up until the very last moment where I had like 20 minutes before I had to leave. And maybe it was even 10 minutes. And there was this one song, it's the second single. And I had done a take of it the day before, but I listened back to it and I was like, I don't like this. I can do this better. And so that one I thought like I might not be able to get it. And then I managed to get it. And like my goal for the album was to do zero editing, and that was the one song. There was one moment where I made this like fling, this thing. I was like, no, we have to like take a little. So even if that was my goal, like I allowed myself one edit because I knew that if I had kept that thing in, I would have been like I would have regretted it. But either way, it was still recorded in one take. We just had to change one little thing. But it was the main thing for me was after doing the last Night Watch album and the last Muskox album, which were just ridiculous albums that were super long and like really intense with long songs, and also like in the Night Watch I was one piece of a bigger group, and then in Muskox I'm playing more of a rhythm role with the strings on top, which is great. But like I think after that I felt a bit like weighed down a little bit. Like I felt like I needed just like some space to just no, just be by myself. Here's the music. Here's these simple, I don't know, pieces, and it's just the thing that I felt like I had to do, and it brought its own challenges. But I'm just glad that like I followed through with the vision, and I hope that when people listen to it, they can sort of like feel this sort of intimacy of just one person there with the guitar, like nothing flashy.
Yeah, and that's interesting, right? That you say that because while to the layman it may seem like simple acoustic music, but when you're kind of adding a lot of this context and also just the fact that you have a very distinct playing style, right, which is the finger picking style again, which we really don't see a lot, right? I mean, I don't know. Do you remember there was the guy who did it with more percussive, Andy McKee? Remember he had
Yep.
gone viral for his cover and stuff like
Yeah, yeah,
that, but
yeah,
he
yeah.
had like that more percussive style in there. Whatever happened to him now? I'm like suddenly remembering. I have to look him up.
I think he's still killing it. I think he's still just, as far as I know, he's still just doing his thing. And that's like a whole other kind of scene of acoustic music, which is amazing, but that's never been like my influence. Because for me there's something about, I love like a slow kind of picked guitar, and like I really like when chords are plucked very slowly. I like just the hearing the space and the resonance. It's almost like, yeah, it's this kind of ambient music, post rock kind of, and almost like doom metal influence, like just kind of slow um, and I've talked about this with friends where it's sort of we're kind of trying to figure out where it fits in. Right? There's a lot of different influences, and anybody could hear it and say, "Oh, that's classical guitar," but like a traditional classical guitarist would say, like, "What you're playing isn't classical guitar," or like it's kind of like folk, but it's not really folk. To me, it's like it's really a mix of all my influences, and even if on the surface it's just, oh, it's regular acoustic music, whatever, but to me like it's very specific. Like there's very specific influences coming through, because I'm a big fan of like hearing what metalheads do outside of metal. Like how they interpret those kind of different styles, and so that's kind of what this is for me. But you don't have to know it to appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting also, right? Because when I think about like just my musical journey, and I'm pretty sure it was similar with you, you kind of find one band and then just go down the rabbit hole, right? Like for me, I still remember listening or discovering at the same time bands like Immortal, but also Woods of Ypres, and then kind of like going, okay, wait, who are the other bands? Or you'd literally, and I feel really old when I say it, but go to the back of the inlay and kind of see which are the other bands thanked or their t-shirts that they're wearing, because that was the only way, right? I mean, there was no Instagram or Snapchat or whatever social media. So that's how you kind of just go down the rabbit hole, really. I mean, like, even when I think interviews you did have, but it'll always be like for fans of or things like that.
Yeah, or
What was,
stickers
yeah,
like
yeah,
on the
exactly.
albums. Yeah.
What was that band that kind of made you go down like the extreme metal rabbit hole, so to say.
Yeah, I think probably Opeth. But actually, you know what? No, I'm gonna take it back. Actually, it was Children of Bodom. Because at the
No
time,
way.
yeah, because at the time, like I was hearing extreme metal, but I couldn't, I didn't like the vocals. Like, and then I heard Children of Bodom. I heard, I think it was like Follow the Reaper, and at the time I was really into power metal, so that's pretty much like power metal with like harsh vocals and like darker lyrics. So I really loved like the melody and the shredding and like just the songwriting, just just amazing. And then the vocals, I still didn't like them, but I could tolerate them. I could still kind of get used to them. And so that would be like the first kind of like harsh vocal band that I could kind of, okay, I think I can listen to this because and then eventually I kind of started appreciating the different types of harsh vocals, and then Opeth would have been like the next one. I think I remember having a burnt CD of Still Life, and I remember listening to it, and there was something I was like, I couldn't tell if I liked it or not. I was like, do I like this, or I don't know. Like it's kind of uncomfortable, but I there's something about it that kept drawing me in. It was just like I didn't understand it, but I wanted to understand it, and then and again that had a lot of melody and a lot of acoustic parts and a lot of clean vocals. So that was an album that I could like listen to, and it wasn't too brutal. So yeah, to me, like Follow the Reaper and Still Life would have been like kind of the gateways that then led me into like some more extreme kind of metal.
Wow, that's really interesting because like I never thought like Children of Bodom, but if I'm thinking about the time, Children of Bodom were all over the place. Like I remember seeing them back in 2006, I want to say, in Toronto live. And I think at one point, Children of Bodom were like practically touring Canada almost every year, if not I mean, every second year, if not every year. So they were all over the place.
Yeah, I saw them
Yeah.
in 2003 in Toronto with Dimmu Borgir.
Wow.
I think it was Dimmu Borgir, Hypocrisy, Children of Bodom. There might have been no, it might have just been those three bands. I actually interviewed Alexi Laiho in
No way.
yeah in 2003. Yeah, like a phone interview, and I had a tape recorder with like plugged into my landline, and I still have the cassette.
Wow.
And I was
Wow.
so
Like,
scared, and he was really cool to talk to. He was just a badass, but he was so friendly. Like,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. No, it's crazy. I mean, like, now it's coming back that that's one of the things both of us had in common, right? Like, college radio in Canada. And I think the 2000s were the time where you still got actual promo copies. Like,
yeah,
if we were doing this back then, I would have actually got a promo copy of your CD like months in advance
yeah,
in
yeah,
one of
yeah, yeah,
those paper trays, or this digi
yeah.
sleeves as it's called. But
I actually got a promo once for because I remember just I started doing reviews and I just emailed a ton of people. I don't even remember where I found the emails, and actually I got a copy of Opeth Damnation, like a jewel case, like in the mail before it came out, and then the like publicist contacted me and asked me. They called me. I don't know how they got my and asked me if I wanted to interview Michael, and I got so scared I said no. And then I hung up and I freaked out and I called them back and I said yes. And then I got to interview Michael Lakerfeld, and my tape recorder, I didn't set it up right. And so I didn't it like one of the plugs wasn't in, so I only got my voice on the cassette. It was
oh
I was
wow,
devastating.
wow,
But I
crazy.
did get to talk to him in those days. That was a big deal for me, like because yeah, they're still one of the greats.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, like, and just coming back to our conversation at the start of influences, right? I mean, there are certain bands, I think, like while you do have the Iron Maidens, Judas Priest, Metallica, and stuff like that, when it came to like more extreme metal, like I cannot believe that like Emperor are currently touring the US. That's like
Yeah.
fucking blows my mind. But like Opeth, uh, Emperor. It was bands like this, Dimmu Borgir, in there. All these bands that, and especially because there was a certain amount of mystique to them also, right?
Yeah.
Like I still can't get over the fact that you got someone to just call you up and say, "Hey, do you want to speak to Michael from Opeth?"
Yeah. Yeah, it is crazy. And I think that era in metal was interesting because like this was again, I would say I started getting into metal like 1999 into 2000, and I think like early 2000s to mid 2000s like internet culture and music was starting to become, like we were just starting to download songs and starting to burn CDs. Like it's kind of like the second wave where like tape trading was like early 90s, and then like CD burning was, and online reviews that and campus radio became like early 2000s, and that was a big like that was a huge thing. And maybe I talked about this in the Muskox interview, but yeah, this one radio show, me and my little brother, we would listen to it every Friday night, and we would put a cassette tape and we would record it. And I still have some of them, and they were mostly playing power and prog metal. And I remember just listening to it and then like going reading reviews, buying the CDs, like because there was nowhere else that I would have ever known this music existed.
Actually, I want to talk about another aspect which I really enjoy talking to musicians when I have the kind of time like this is, do you currently listen to contemporary acts, new bands? Does that give you time at all?
I think, yeah, I'm always trying to kind of follow. Like, I think a lot of the music I listen to is within the past few years. Like, I find that actually I'm more focused in the instrumental music world. Like, so I'm always kind of trying to find new, interesting instrumental music. In terms of new metal, I don't follow that as much. I'll check metal websites every so often to just kind of see what's going on. But I think I listened to so much metal growing up, and I feel like my influences are just so like I find like I get excited when like older metal bands that I grew up listening to come out with something new. Uh, I'm always curious there, like or seeing kind of these sort of things. But I think yeah, there's just so much of it nowadays. But I find like I mostly follow sort of like instrumental stuff. Um, but yeah, but I try to keep up with every Friday. I try to find like or what albums came out that day, and I sort of just follow, see what comes up, and sometimes friends will send me things like, oh, you should listen to this. I think with music, like even though everything is available now, I think as music fans we still want a little bit of a journey, we still want a little bit of a surprise, a little bit of okay, like oh, what's this? And then, oh, okay, this brings me over here. Actually, lately I've been sort of I have such a big music collection that lately I've been sort of a little bit tired of streaming and trying to just revisit my CD collection. And there's so many things that are there that I don't even really know. It's like you buy them and you listen to them and then you put them on the shelf. And so that's been kind of fun, just like rediscovering things that I already have that I'm not that familiar with.
Okay, so you completely made me switch my question, but what's been that gem in the last week, month that you discovered? I mean, if it's on Bandcamp, I'll buy it and
Well,
play it,
yeah,
or
yeah. Well, this one
tell
is
me.
like I would say this kind of fits both questions because it's contemporary, but it's also one that I sort of rediscovered it. I think it only came out last year, but I hadn't listened to it for a little bit. So this is the guitarist from the early lineup of Ulver. So his
Okay.
name's Haavard, and so he played on
Oh,
those early
I
albums, and
fucking love that album.
yeah,
That is
so he
so beautiful.
yeah, so he released like a solo record, his first record in years, and a solo acoustic record just called Hovard last year, and I loved it when it came out, and then I listened to other things, and then the other night I put it on in my Discman in bed in the dark, and man, that album is just incredible. Like it's so good, and so yeah, so that's one that people need to listen to. And again, it's such a niche genre, like that I think it doesn't get that much attention, but man, that album is incredible. And so I actually got to meet him in the fall, because I went to Norway to do a performance of like this old growth material because I'm doing my tab book with a publisher in Norway, and he had done a tab book of the acoustic Ulver album, or a sheet music book. And so I kind of got in touch with Haavard, and I've been talking to him, and I told him, okay, I'm coming to Oslo, and I ended up meeting him, and that was a real. There's a picture of me on Instagram with him, and that was a real dream because he's his like that over acoustic album Kveldsanger is like that's like in my DNA, you know, and to meet him and to just chat with him was a real like it was a real honor. And then that was before I had even heard the Haavard album hadn't come out yet. I'd only heard the singles, and then the album came out, and I was, man, that's really amazing. So that's one recently, and then from that same scene, the Finnish band Tenhi. I don't know if we've talked about Tenhi at all. They're an acoustic project
No.
from Finland. Oh, okay. They're just anytime I meet somebody that doesn't know them, I get so excited because I just know like how great they are. So they just released their first record in like 11, 12 years, and they're on the same label as Haavard. And so yeah, that's a Finnish band, Tenhi, and they're a huge influence on me. And they're just like unbelievable. Like they're just so good. Again, it's like it's folk music, but it's just so much more than that. Like it's just so deep, and like the instrumentation and the arrangements, and it just doesn't sound like anything else. So yeah, lately I've sort of been like diving back into my original influences, but like through modern albums that they've made, which is like a it's kind of like what I was saying, like those things that originally influenced me. When I see those artists come back after a long time and do something amazing, that to me is like that it's like a treat. Like I never thought I would hear another thing from them, and then here it is. So that's pretty amazing. So yeah, Tenhi, they're man, they're one of my favorite bands ever. They're so good.
And I'm also going to give a plug. You actually got to speak to Tenhi also on the Invisible Oranges podcast.
Yeah, yeah. So me and John from Invisible Oranges, we chat on Facebook, and we both love Tenhi, and the album came out, and or it was announced, and so we were just freaking out. And then he told me he had interviewed them before, just a print interview, and then he told me like, oh, I'm trying to interview them. Would you want to be a part of it? I was like, oh my goodness, really? Like, yeah. And so that was a dream as well. Like to be able to meet Hovard, and like honestly, like the fact that I was like got to like collaborate with Egelok, meet Hovard, interview Tenhi, like those three projects really like shaped my life, my my musical life. Like yeah, so to be able to like speak with them and to tell them how much I appreciate them is like it's I think that ultimately as an artist, I think that's that we're all just fans. It's like any artist, it doesn't matter the most famous person ever, they'll talk about the people that inspired them and just get excited. It's like it's that excitement that like keeps us alive. Yeah.
Yeah. So before I jump into the Harvard track, what I want to say is, there's a saying that, never meet your idols, but I don't think that applies in metal, right? I mean, even like the most badass, the biggest assholes or whatever you think are also the coolest people. So, yeah, I think what you're describing is exactly that. But since you talked to about the Harvard album, and I did really enjoy it, I'm gonna take the liberty of playing the first song of the album because I think that completely like dives you in and gives a complete picture of what the rest of the album is.
Yeah, and also I just want to mention that the cellist Raphael Weinroth Brown and the former violinist of Muskox, Evan Runge, they play on this track.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So there's some 6 degrees of separation of sort
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
So
Yeah, so this album is amazing. And so we'll hear the first track, Printemps, which is French for spring. And it features the cellist of Muskox, Raphael Weinroth Brown, and the former violinist, Evan Runge.
So yeah, I'm still with Nathaniel, and we're talking all things his solo album influences. But here's the part where we come back to your music. And one of the things I always enjoy talking to you about is your multiple projects, also, right? I mean, in the last interview, you kind of talked about your solo album. You're also part of Musk Ox and The Night Watch. Uh, what can you share updates about both projects?
Sure. So the Night Watch, that project ended last or 2 years ago or last year. No, last year. And so myself and the drummer, we've actually started a new project, um, and which is more kind of in the. I hesitate to say jazz, but it's kind of like if two prog metal guys ended up doing some kind of like instrumental jazz, but with some more kind of prog influences and some heavy moments. So it's kind of like taking the more sort of groove based elements of the Night Watch and creating a new project. And so we're actually working with a sax player right now, and we've written a whole album, and so we've just been rehearsing lately. So we haven't fully announced the project yet, but I'm very very excited about that. It's just kind of a whole other um, a different sort of like outlet, something that focuses more on groove, but still keeps it kind of dark, still is instrumental, is still, kind of cinematic and interesting and I guess animated would be the word. So the Night Watch unfortunately is no more, but we've continued on. And then Muskox, me and Raf, we're still great friends. We just yeah, we just need to meet up and like whenever we hang out, we say we're going to talk about muskox stuff, and we end up just like listening to records and eating food and just laughing. And so I think what we would like to do is not wait 7 years for another album. So I think we're I don't know. I think we'd like to try to just do something that comes out a lot sooner. I almost want to do kind of like an old growth album, but for Muskox, one where it's just myself and Raf, just guitar and cello, live, very stripped down. Because our last two albums were so epic. So we did have one rehearsal not long ago, and that was writing with him. We just music just comes out. So um, yeah, I think for us, we've done these huge albums that are just so much work to do, and I think it'd be fun to do some singles and some EPs and just kind of keep the music flowing. Um, and then solo wise, I have a whole other good solo album that's written and ready to be recorded. So I'm gonna try to record that and release that not in 7 years. So that's kind of my next focus. But the main thing that I'm going to do solo next that I will mention here is I did a solo guitar arrangement of "In the Shadow of Our Pale Companion" by Agalloch from The Mantle. So one day I think it was on an Agalloch Facebook group, somebody said, "Oh, you should do like a Mantle song." And so obviously I picked the biggest one and I started working on it just as a solo version. And I was doing little pieces of it, and I thought, okay, this is working. Okay, this is working. Then I was thinking like, okay, but these parts probably won't work. And I just worked on it for a solid like year and or a little bit more. And I ended up doing a solo guitar version of this like 14-minute epic. And it worked out really, really well because the song is so amazing that even when you strip it down, it's just beautiful. And I think that song has it's a very solitary kind of song. It's very, I don't want to say lonely, but it feels like very solitary. And so when you take all those melodies and you bring them to just a solo guitar, I find the mood is still captured. So last summer, I ended up recording it. And then just recently, I got the master and the artwork. So the plan is once Old Growth is out, I'm going to release that maybe in August. And that's a thing that I'm really, really happy about. It's kind of like a gift it's more like for fans of Agalog. I think people who like Agalog will enjoy that, and yeah, I'm just really really happy with it, and it's nice to do something new right after releasing an album of material that feels kind of old. So I'm very very excited to share that for Agalog fans, and Agalog have reunited, so I think it's a good time to do that. So that's the next kind of solo thing, and then actually I have a lot of solo projects because I put kind of my solo stuff a bit on hold while I was doing Muskox and Nightwatch, and so now I have this like a ton of solo stuff. So I have like this Agalock thing, which I'm going to release. Then I have like a new full length album. But I have this thing I started working on recently, which is an EP of acoustic interludes from metal albums, just like solo guitar versions of them. And I started, and I feel like that's a thing I could record pretty quickly because the songs are maybe like 1 or 2 minutes. But I started sort of compiling all these interludes and doing solo versions of them, and a lot of the interludes are like piano interludes or keyboards or whatever, and that's been a really fun project. And I think releasing that after Old Growth will be fun because it shows like the direct link between like that album and the like metal interludes that sort of influenced me. So yeah, so that's something I'm pretty excited about. It's pretty short. It's maybe like 10 minutes because it's like 9 or 10 songs, but yeah, that's what I'm going to try to record this summer and release it pretty soon because I don't know. There's just all these kind of like obscure little interludes that had a big impact on me.
Wow. So you've got a lot on your plate. So I dare ask, are you planning on doing some live shows?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, I'm gonna do like just locally. I'm gonna do a little an album release. Actually, lately, what I've been doing is there's a farmers market that's near my house, so I go and I play for 2 hours, just on the weekends, and people just give me money if they like it, and that's been fun in terms of it's not a real show, but it's fun to just kind of play and see people, and also the little kids react really well to music, like they're very curious. It's kind of interesting just being kind of in the background. But I'm planning on going to Europe in September, so I've been talking to this other acoustic project from the Netherlands called Thurnin, and he was really influenced by Muskox, and he released an amazing album a few years ago that really got very popular and got like 1 million streams on YouTube or something. And so now he's about to release his second album, and so he invited me to go to Europe and play with him. So I'm like, because his albums are a lot of layers of guitars, and so I'm gonna like learn one of the guitars, and we're gonna actually play Prophecy Fest together in September in Germany, and that's actually where Egglock is doing their reunion show. So that kind of just works out, and so yeah, and then me and him we're trying to figure out maybe some other shows in Europe while I'm there. So Europe in September, that's kind of the plan. Nothing other than Prophecy Fest with Thurnan. Um, there's nothing 100% concrete, so sort of just seeing what happens.
Awesome. So there's a lot to look forward to, and I'm definitely going to leave all your social media links. But since you mentioned at the start, I think it's a great way to wrap up. Is you've got both tab books as well as a vinyl. How does everyone get a hold of that?
Yeah, that's just available on Bandcamp. Yeah, that's the best way to do it. And there's also vinyl and tab book bundles where you can save a little bit of money. If there's anyone that is a guitar player that's interested in finger picking, I think this tab book is. I think there's a lot of interesting material there um, for if you're learning or if you're a bit more experienced. And also, I wanted to mention that I do guitar lessons online. So if anyone likes my music and wants to have an online guitar lesson or just to talk about songwriting or finger picking or whatever, you can contact me through my website nathanaellarochette.com or contact me through Bandcamp. I'm always interested in sharing the small bit of guitar knowledge that I have.
Awesome. As always, Nathaniel, it's a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks so much for taking time out.
Yeah, hey, thank you so much for the support over the years. It's always hopefully our paths can meet in the physical world one of these days.
Cheers.
All right, thanks so much.
I always enjoy talking to Nathaniel because, there's so much that we know each other and we've been following each other for quite some time now. So it was really great to get him to open up and talk about old growth and the entire process behind it. Do also check out the recommendations that Nathaniel had. I'm going to leave them all in the show notes. But if you enjoyed the single that I played and are curious and want to know more, why don't you check out Old Growth? I'm going to leave a link to that. The digital copies are currently available as well as vinyl. So if you're a vinyl collector, maybe this would be a great addition to your collection. But before I sign off, as always, if you want to get in touch and have your music featured on the podcast, you can hit me up, trendcrusher@gmail.com, or you can hit me up on any of my social media profiles. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, still holding out on threads. Let's see if I bite the bullet very soon. But that's all from me, and I'll see you very soon. Cheers.